I think that's before he even started on his killing spree. Just looking at that face, thinking, what the hell's going on in there? You know, never know.
For 6 long years, the women of Yorkshire were terrorised by the man who came to be known as the Yorkshire Ripper.
Peter Sutcliffe did not give a damn about who he killed or even how he killed. Any woman was fair game.
13 women were murdered, with another 7 surviving the brutal attacks.
It's extremely quick, it's violent. You know, he stabbed some victims 50 times.
A ruthless killer on the street. At home, Peter Sutcliffe was a dependable son and brother.
He'd help Mum, with money, because Dad was very tight with his money. I'd go to Peter, as, if I needed help with anything or a bit of advice. He wasn't a psychopath, he had feelings, so for him to go out and then murder all them women, it's just unless something happened to him that triggered him, I don't know, I'll never know.
From 1975 to 1981, women on the streets of Yorkshire were brutalised by a mystery assailant.
It starts in 75. We get something like 3 murders in 75 and 70, and then attacks where he doesn't actually successfully kill people because he's disturbed. We get another 4 in 77, and it becomes that nearly every 30 days we're getting a murder.
The attacks and murders are what we call blitz attacks, and that's that they're extremely violent, extremely fast, and there's not a lot of sexual activity going alongside them.
He was a misogynist. He hated women, all women.
Everybody was frightened, especially women going out on the night on their own. Are you safe?
I believe one of my sisters even carried a knife in her handbag because of this Ripper. Every woman were in fear of this man, They were terrified of him.
Carl Sutcliffe had no idea that the man feared by millions of women was in fact his brother Peter.
And I used to get Peter to drive my girlfriend home, so the Ripper didn't go. So delivering into the hands of the Ripper, although she was safe as houses, he wouldn't have done out to her because she was my girlfriend, but he was a great brother, believe it or not. Really, really good guy to me.
At night, the police have every man available out on the streets, even though for the most part they're deserted. But their presence alone and their search for a lead cannot ease the common fear of the unknown. Just if, when and where the Ripper will kill again.
Mum and Dad had 7 children, Peter being the eldest, then my sister under him was Anne, then Michael, then Maureen, then Jane and me, and there was Thomas, but he died when he was a baby. My father was John William Sutcliffe. He served in the Navy in the Second World War. My mum was Kathleen Francis Sutcliffe, formerly Coonan. My mum was lovely. Really nice woman. She tried her best with us, We never went without. We ate well, but we wasn't very wealthy, to say the least.
Carl and Peter's father, John Sutcliffe, was less of a warm presence in his children's lives.
My dad was quite the womaniser. And used to like to go to drink. He used to drink, go to pubs quite a lot and just leave my mum at home. And he had various affairs as I was growing up. My dad, when he give you a beating, he give you a real beating. He'd punch you as a child, he'd punch you in the face, kick you.
As well as dealing with violence at home, Young Peter Sutcliffe also had a tough time at school.
Peter at school was picked on because he was quite small and frail. I think because he got bullied as a child, he built his body up so he looked more intimidating and made himself stronger and gave himself some self-confidence. Started lifting weights. He was very, very strong, actually. He could walk up and down stairs on his hands, lift amazing weights. He was quite a powerful man.
16 years older than Carl, the teenage Peter Sutcliffe loomed large in the life of his little brother.
He was just like a father figure. He stood in for my dad, take me everywhere. He used to go on the back of his motorbike. I were in awe of him, really. And he'd buy me things, take me out, and buy me things that my mum couldn't afford.
You've got a father who is not available, he's out with other women, he's abusive, he's an alcoholic. You've got a mother who's trying to keep everything together. And what a child will do is look for what they feel is the safest person who's going to take care of them and also who they can look up to. And in Carl's position, that was Peter.
Just great big brother. He was fantastic. Also time for me. That's exactly how I remember him. Not always in a suit, but I remember him like this. That look, the hair and the beard. Brings back good memories of Peter before he turned into the thing that he turned into.
From a very early age, it's becoming clear that Peter Sutcliffe's family had no idea that he had this whole secret life that he lived.
As I got older, and when I was a teenager, he'd mentioned prostitutes to me. When he'd take me to a pub I saw in Bradford, he was always staring at him. Oh, look, there's a prostitute there. And I was like, so what? I'm not interested. Oh, no, I'm just pointing it out, it's there. But he definitely seemed keen. He was very interested in women, but I just don't think he had the confidence, maybe, to talk to them and chat to them.
So here we are on Lum Lane. It's about half a mile from Bradford city centre. And in the 70s, it really was the red light area. And there would be scores, and I mean scores, of girls and women all throughout the day and night selling sex on every single street corner. This was also a rat run, a shortcut from the city centre. And Sutcliffe used this to get to his home in Heaton, which probably explains why he was spotted in the red light area more than 40 times.
Red light district, it could be violent. They used to get punters who could be extremely violent. So it wasn't out of the blue that suddenly you'd get a sex worker that was attacked. But the community felt safe to start with. Why? Because they were out on the street, they would get in his car. There was willing participants, if you like, with him to get into a vehicle and he could drive them somewhere. Or they was out on the street in isolated areas.
Sutcliffe's first attempted murder was of a woman called Anna. Now, Anna was a sex worker, and Sutcliffe had tried to solicit her, and she'd rejected his advances. Sutcliffe stalked Anna before attacking her with a hammer, slashing her stomach with a knife, and then leaving her for dead as he fled after being disturbed by a neighbour.
We're in Halifax town centre. The Royal Oak Public House behind us. Olive Smell is a cleaner in the town. She'd come with some friends Friday evening just to have a drink before going home. So taking her husband Harry a fish and chip supper home, and her friends give her a lift up to Bhutan. Sutcliffe followed in his car. He'd been drinking in this pub with his friend. He'd made some remark that he thought she was a sex worker. He saw her go down the cobble street to her home address, and he struck. And he struck with the hammer, knocking her to the floor, and then slashed her across the buttocks. He was disturbed, otherwise she would have died.
In 1975, police did not link the attacks on Anna Rogulski and Olive Smelt, nor did they link a strikingly similar assault later that month on 14-year-old Tracy Brown, which the teenager survived.
He was looking for women in a vulnerable situation, be it student, be it nurse, be it schoolgirl in Silsden, be it somebody in Keighley, any woman on their own.
Sutcliffe's first murder victim was a woman called Wilma.
A lady that's out to earn her money on the streets, and she doesn't turn up home.
She'd been bludgeoned to death and left on Scott Hall playing fields. It was like a no-go area.
Sutcliffe hit her over the head in order to incapacitate her before proceeding to slash and brutalise her body.
And then all of a sudden, Mum went as the second victim.
At the age of 17, Emily's son Neil Jackson found himself at the centre of a living nightmare.
The night when Mum was murdered, attacked, I was babysitting. I'd say Mum and Dad had gone out. I put kids to bed and gone to bed myself. I woke up following morning. My dad's downstairs. I gets up and no sign of Mum. Knock at the door from the police, telling us what happened to Mum. And it's a very big shock.
Peter Sutcliffe had now become a serial killer.
I really didn't notice anything change about him. He was just normal Peter, you know. He'd be there. If he could help you out, he'd help you out. If I were a bit short of money, as a 19-year-old or 18, he'd say, here's a few quid, you know, and make sure we're all right. You know, some people might think, oh, you must have known something was going on. No, why would I? He was just a normal brother to me.
When he was growing up, Peter Sutcliffe's relationship with women was complex.
Sutcliffe idolised his mother, and that was really damaged as his father started to accuse his mother of having an affair.
Once my dad had found out my mum was having an affair with a local policeman. I think she was getting revenge after years of him cheating. My dad took my elder siblings to the hotel and caught my mum with the man, which must have been quite embarrassing for her.
Peter Sutcliffe would later tell a psychiatrist that his mother's affair had broken up his happy family. He'd also claimed that 2 girlfriends had cheated on him. In 1974, Peter Sutcliffe fell in love and got married.
I think when Peter moved out of the family home, I would have been about 10, maybe, 8, 9, 10. And he moved to Garden Lane with Sonia. Peter met Sonia in a pub in Bradford. He was out with some of his biker friends, Teddy Boys, whatever they called themselves. They seemed pretty inseparable. Once he'd met her, that was it. And he'd never brought a girlfriend home ever before Sonia.
Sutcliffe's first known crime was the physical assault of a woman. And what we know is that in the lead up to this, he'd previously been rejected by a sex worker who'd stolen his money, and he'd went out looking for this woman. He couldn't find her. Instead, he targeted a totally random woman using a large rock that he'd put in a sock in order to hit her over the head with serious force.
Although the police were called, Sutcliffe's victim declined to press charges. By 1976, Peter Sutcliffe had become a killer. His second victim had been Emily Jackson, a sex worker in Leeds.
They labelled them prostitutes. They were innocent victims, they all were. They weren't treated any different to anybody else. You know, you wrap your arms around the victims of murder and the family, you know, to try and console them.
It was only after Emily's death that her son Neil found out his father had persuaded his mother to work on the streets.
The business it had times and suggested going out on the game. As far as I knew, they were going out for a drink 4 or 5 nights a week. But when you think they're going out together for a drink, they're going to be coming home together, not separate. It's like a shock, realising what she's been doing.
5 women had been attacked in the same way, in the same area, in less than a year. 2 had died of their injuries.
It's a very sad fact that the murders of Wilma, Emily, in Leeds didn't really have an impact. They were kind of dismissed by the Nationals as just the murders of a prostitute, just the murders of a good time girl. And in fact, the first 2 murders weren't connected for what would be another year.
In early 1977, 2 more women were murdered, Irene Richardson and Patricia Atkinson.
It was like every 2 or 3 months. It'd go off scene, and then all of a sudden it'd be back. Another one. And every time there were another one, there'd be a photo of Mum, Wilma McCann, Irene Richardson. There were different ones. Showed that every time there was murder. It was very hard.
By the spring of 1977, it had finally dawned on the police, the press and the public that a serial killer was operating in Yorkshire.
It started with, somebody that's attacking sex workers. Why? Who is he? Why? And as I say, suddenly it gets called the Ripper, and that in itself, the naming of somebody like that sticks with everybody.
Can you predict when the Ripper might strike again?
Not at all. Could be in 10 years, could be next week, could be right now.
As the number of victims of Yorkshire's mystery serial killer grew, Carl Sutcliffe had no reason to suspect his older brother, Peter.
He was just sort of laid back and a bit of a joker. Never seen him get violent or angry, really. Well, apart from dropping me out the window the once, but I don't know whether he actually did it on purpose or I was just teasing him one day in the upstairs bedroom, and he was chasing me around. And he caught me and hung me by the feet out of the window. So maybe my head was 8-9 feet from the floor, and I thought, well, he's not going to drop me. He's just anyway. He dropped me. He just let go. I landed on my head and rolled over and nearly broke my bloody neck. Maybe there was some. I should have spotted something unwired with him then.
In June 1977, a teenage girl, Jane MacDonald, was murdered in Leeds.
A beautiful young girl who just happened to be in an area near to the red light area, on her way home from a night out with her boyfriend. When beautiful, pretty Jane MacDonald with that blonde hair suddenly became the focus of the murder hunt, then the Nationals were all over it. Journalists, flocked, and it became the story it became.
Jane MacDonald, I think she was 16 in Leeds, she wasn't a sex worker. And that didn't seem to have as much effect as on the inquiry. He actually progressed through away from the red light district. Was that because of the police attention? He knew the police because the police were all over it. It was common knowledge that police were taking car numbers. So did he look elsewhere?
The police became almost obsessed with the connection to prostitution. They described Jane MacDonald's murder in Leeds as a mistake. So if you weren't frequenting red light areas, if you stayed away from them, then you were safe, by inference.
Over the next 6 months, Sutcliffe attacked 6 more women. Maureen Long was left for dead and spent 9 weeks in hospital recovering from her injuries. The next victim did not survive, but her murder yielded a clue that brought the police the closest they'd ever been to catching the killer.
Jean Jordan was paid with a £5 note, and it was a nice, crisp, new £5 note. They made inquiries into that and found it was a batch of 8,000. And they traced it to people, to various firms. One went to Sutcliffe's firm, Clark's Engineering, where he worked. They used to tease him and call him the Ripper because he looked like the E-fit. So it could have ended up in Sutcliffe's pay packet. He was interviewed by West Yorkshire Police. He was alibied. You know, he was at home that night, or he was here.
I wasn't aware that Peter had come on police radar. I found out afterwards that he'd been questioned a few times after they caught him, but he never mentioned it to me, ever, that he'd been questioned by the police.
In December 1977, Marilyn Moore became Sutcliffe's next victim. She survived and provided police with an accurate description of her attacker's appearance. Somehow the connection was still not made, and the Ripper killed again.
What was really sad about Yvonne Pearson, and I think in a way underlines the sad lives that these women were living, was that her body wasn't found for several months after he killed her. Sadly, nobody looking for her, nobody reporting her as missing.
Just 10 days later, 18-year-old Helen Ritka became Sutcliffe's 8th murder victim.
Her and her sister had gone out. They got this agreement between each other. If anybody picked them up, then they'd take the car number, and if they weren't back in an hour, they'd call the police. Sadly, it didn't work, because Helen got picked up by Sutcliffe.
On the 6th of May 1978, Sutcliffe murdered 40-year-old Vera Millward in Manchester. Her body was discovered by workmen the following morning. Sutcliffe did not kill again for almost a year, but his next victim would drastically alter how his crimes were seen.
Back in April 1979, the body of Josephine Whittaker, the 19-year-old bank clerk, was found in this park. I'm the on-duty detective that morning, a young detective. I'm called out to this body. You see immediately it's a murder.
It was a day very much like this, that April. It was foggy and it was rainy and pretty miserable. And I got a knock at the door to say that a body had been found in Savile Park. The last thing I thought was that this would be a Ripper attack. It's a leafy suburb, it's aspirational, and it's a million miles away from the red light area. But as soon as I got here, the first thing I spotted were the Ripper Squad detectives, and I'd never seen a body before. And I was absolutely horrified to arrive here and to be able to make out the face of a young girl. Without admitting it, from that moment, police knew that they'd got it wrong, that this wasn't a man out to murder prostitutes, but that no woman was safe. And in fact, that's the first time we ever heard those words, no woman, anywhere, anytime, is safe.
Hundreds of feminists marched through the city demanding that the police should put a 9 o'clock curfew on men until the Ripper is caught. That may seem a trifle bizarre, but the fact is that thousands of women are already under their own self-imposed curfew.
After Josephine Whittaker became Peter Sutcliffe's 10th murder victim, efforts to catch him ramped up even further.
The inquiry was based in Leeds, at Millgarth Police Station. They had to reinforce the floor. They ended up with 32,000 documents. Something like 5.2 million vehicles had been checked. 150 officers detectives were working on it. The detectives were working 18 hours a day on this. The senior detectives, the detectives on the ground, everybody wanted him.
The public was aware now that all women were potential victims of the Ripper.
I used to go to the pictures with my girlfriend and Peter and Sonia. When we'd been out, I'd just ask him if he'd run her home, you know, and what he spoke to her about on way home, I don't know, because it was only like 2 mile drive, 5 minutes.
In the early summer of 1979, the Ripper investigation was derailed by a taped message to the police purporting to be from the killer himself. The speaker's accent was traced to the northeast of England.
And of course, the query then flips and it moves to the Yorkshire Ripper, or the man dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper, has got a Geordie accent.
The tape was played in every supermarket, it was on the radio, it was on the television. There were posters on every wall, help us catch the killer.
Since the voice of the man who claims to be the Ripper was broadcast last night, specially set up switchboards in Leeds, Halifax and Sunderland have been flooded with calls.
At the time I was about 19 and 20 years old, and Peter used to come and see me. There was a Geordie guy who lived up the road, and everybody was looking out for a Geordie guy at the time. And this Geordie guy had the same beard and the moustache, the goatee beard, as the Ripper, the same hairdo as the artist's impressions of the Ripper. I remember one night it was dark and I went out my window and he was walking past and Peter happened to be there visiting me. I said, Peter, is that bloody Ripper there? I said, I'm sure he's a Ripper. And he had a look at it. He said, no, probably not. I said to him, if I ever got that Ripper, I'd cut his bloody balls off. And then he got right upset. And he was nearly crying. And he stormed off. But I didn't put 2 and 2 together. You wouldn't think, oh, my brother must be the Ripper, because I just thought he must have had some problem with his marriage and he'd come to talk about it, and there's me blathering on about this Ripper.
Carl, as the regular person in this picture, completely innocent, is looking at his brother going, we are the same. And when you are in a family system and you found someone that you're bonded to, you see the similarities, you see the areas of commonality. You do not see that possibly this person could be the murderer. So for Peter, he's hidden in plain sight.
But afterwards I was thinking, God, why didn't you see that? Why didn't you spot that clue? At the times he'd come to that flat and spend an hour in my bathroom there. It was a shared bathroom. He'd been there an hour, and I'd say, "You'll hurry up in there, Peter. There's 3 flats have to share that." "Oh yeah, I won't be out long." He'd be washing clothes and himself, and tell me that he'd got oil on them at work and stuff. But had he? I don't know. Things like that. I was thinking, what, he cleaning up after his murders in my bathroom?
The so-called Wearside Jack tapes from a man claiming to be the Ripper delayed the real killer being caught and cost more women's lives.
We look at the likes of Marcella Claxton, who was attacked and survived, gives an e-fit. Then we get another e-fit that looks similar. We get told he's got a Yorkshire accent. There's no doubt about it, it's the same person that's committing the crime, and we've now got an e-fit. But yet, if he doesn't have a Geordie accent, they're not interested.
So if we'd been told to stay in, which many of us were very angry at, and there were Ripper squads patrolling all the red light areas, who would be the next victims? And there was a suggestion it would be nurses and students. And this time it was a 20-year-old student called Barbara Leach who'd left her friends, as many students do, in the pub and said, "I've got some work to do," and walked home less than a quarter of a mile and never made it, and was found in an alleyway, back Ash Grove.
In 1980, Sutcliffe attacked 5 women in just 4 months. 3 survived, but 2 did not. Just after New Year's in 1981, he picked up Olivia Rivers. As he sat with her in his car, he deliberated on whether or not to kill her.
He's gone to Sheffield, red light district. The sex worker in question is picked up. Sergeant and PC, marked police car, stops, starts talking to him. And soon they realise everything's not right. Then they decide, because of who he is, they check with the incident room. He's been checked so many times through all the red light districts. Suddenly, there's a bright light shining that, wow, this is a person. So they arrest him. And they bring him to Dewsbury Police Station in West Yorkshire. In the meantime, he's sent them back to search where they picked him up. And they recover a screwdriver and a hammer from what it secreted, having been, arrested by them.
It was a Sunday morning, but the phone rang. My husband answered it and said, "It's West Yorkshire Police." So I got to the phone and he went, "I'm going to read you a statement. A man has been arrested in connection with the so-called Yorkshire Ripper murders. He will appear at Dewsbury Magistrates tomorrow morning." Dropped the phone. I got in my car and I didn't go home for 3 days.
When he's arrested, of course, an opportune moment, is arrested. He's got an inverted V-neck jumper on underneath his trousers. The V-neck is so his genitals are clear. He's got pads to his elbows and his knees so that when he's knelt down with his victims, it's comfy. And it shows the amount of planning he goes into. And of course, he's interviewed by the officers. He's interviewed, I think, over 3 days. And he basically talks.
We all went to the press conference that Sunday night at Dewsbury Police Station, and there were people coming out on the streets. There were people outside that station. There were people outside our radio station. Is it true? Has he been caught? Is it true? They wanted their lives to start again.
I was at work and somebody heard it on the radio and told me. So that night I come home and I watched the news. It was like a relief, big weight off my shoulder, knowing they've got the killer and knowing there can be relief of being murdered.
16 miles away in Bingley, Peter Sutcliffe's family were about to find themselves at the centre of the storm.
I nearly passed out. I thought, nah. Then I thought, they must have got the wrong guy. Bloody big mistake, this. It can't be our Peter, for Christ's sake.
Peter Sutcliffe's family did not hear of his arrest on suspicion of multiple murders until 3 days later.
I was in between jobs and I thought I'd go into the local library. And I went in and I was walking around and there was this chap with this, I think it was the Sun, I think it was. I walked past and just glanced at the paper and it was a double spread of picture with Peter's house there. So I read it and that's how I found out. Which was a real shock to me anyway, but he fell through the floor. I went up to my sister's and all the family had gathered at my sister's and there were press everywhere, just reporters. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating to say hundreds of reporters with cameras and just a real shock. My youngest sister, when I met up with the family in my sister's house, after just finding out Peter, she was in such shock, the doctor had to sedate her. Yeah, it wasn't very nice, not very nice. I was in shock, but, it upset me to see my sisters like that, For me to see what it had done to my sisters, this, finding out that the brother was the Ripper. I suppose after all them years of living in abject fear of this man, the safest women on the planet, and then having to live with the fact that this monster were our Peter. My mum died only 3 or 4 months before. Luckily, she never found out about it. It would have destroyed her.
To find yourself in a position where, retrospectively, you recognise that the person you thought you knew, you didn't know at all, can be horribly traumatising, because you then start to question everything. Who am I? Why didn't I see that? Could I have stopped them? What's going on? What's my part in this? And I think it leaves the victims ripping themselves apart, trying to make sense of a devastating, depraved situation.
My initial thought was, with the court, they've got the wrong man. It's not Peter, no chance. So they're going to let him go. I thought in a day or two they'll be out and they'll be back searching for him. So I decided I best go to Armley Jail and talk to him. Just sat down across from him and said, "You haven't done this, have you, Peter?" He said, "I'm afraid I have." And I said, Why? And he said, "Oh, just cleaning up, our kid, just cleaning up." I said, "What?" He said, "Just cleaning up." And I couldn't even speak to him then. I couldn't reconcile the Yorkshire Bill with Peter. You know, the man I'd grown up to like a father figure. Well, this sadistic madman, brutal murderer, my brother. God. Just no.
At the Old Bailey in London on the 5th of May 1981, Peter Sutcliffe stood trial for 13 counts of murder and 7 of attempted murder. Journalist Krista Ackroyd attended the trial.
And so we were preparing to see the monster, the man who had put all our lives on hold for so many years. And I'm going to be honest, I expected a monster. A big man who would look terrifying. And then stepping into the dock was this small, insignificant, pathetic little human being.
Peter did plead not guilty on the grounds of diminished responsibility, and that God, he had God's voice coming from a gravestone, which the gravestone actually is about a quarter of a mile from where I'm sat now.
Sutcliffe claimed that while working as a grave digger, a voice had spoken to him, telling him to kill prostitutes.
If that was his reason, then it falls nearly at every hurdle, for the simple fact he didn't just attract sex workers. He didn't just kill them to eliminate them, he mutilated them. He had sex with them himself. He bit them. He only chose the sex workers because they were out on the street. They were an easy target for him.
He did say to me on one of the visits that he said, "While Sonia with us, if I just play crazy, I'll be out in 10 years if I pretend I'm bonkers."
On the 22nd of May 1981, Peter Sutcliffe was found guilty of murdering 13 women and attempting to murder 7 others between 1975 and 1980.
And the mob, quite rightly, went crazy. The whole of that building echoed with screams of "hang him," "you," evil, people had banners. You could actually hear as if you were there within the crowd in this incongruous Victorian courtroom, the echo of hatred.
I did feel like I was grieving. It was such a big part of my life, you know. I've seen him every week or two, you know, as long as I were alive. And he just disappeared and turned from this wonderful big brother that'd do anything for me and be there for me to just a different person. This monster that everybody hated. I hated.
Sutcliffe was sentenced to 20 concurrent sentences of life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 30 years. In 2010, this was increased to a whole life order, much of it spent in Broadmoor High Security Psychiatric Hospital.
He never accepted the scale of what he did. It was always, woe is me. I mean, I've been in here, I've been in here 28 years, 29 years, however long it was when you were talking to him at the time. It's about time they let me out. Other murderers get out and things. It just he didn't get any idea of the scale of who he was and what he'd done, I don't think. He just thought one day they were going to let him out. But I knew damn well they'd never let him out. He'd ring me every Tuesday at 6:45 from Broadmoor. That lasted about half an hour. Then eventually I got sick of him moaning, complaining about his lot. And I said to him, well, come on, Peter. You know, they could have bloody hung you years ago. Right up to the day he died, I suppose. Never showed any remorse, ever. Never said, oh, I'm really sorry that I killed all these people. I needed more than that from him, but I never got it. In a way, I might sound a bit callous, but a bit of a relief. I knew my brother, and I was upset that my brother had died, but it was a relief that it was finally over. You know, it was over. I didn't have to, I could proper put him out of my mind now. He's gone, you know.
One thing about Peter Sutcliffe that people perhaps don't know is that 26 children or thereabouts grew up without a mum because of him. And that's horrendous.
When Sutcliffe killed Mam, he did not just kill Mam, he killed the family. Everybody went separate ways.
Yeah, I was angry. I went through different emotions from what Peter had done, from anger to being upset. I just couldn't, I'll never fathom out why he did it. I'll never be able to make sense of what he did. How do you make sense of that? I don't know. If you have a brother and he's quite normal, does all the normal things brothers do, and suddenly he's this psycho killer. I'll never make sense of it. Never.